Have you ever wondered, could a dazzling empire collapse just because of an overheard conversation? That night, under the flickering yellow lights reflecting off the damp streets, Nathan Cole, CEO of the famous restaurant chain, Cole's Bistro, hunched inside an old hoodie, a cap pulled low over his face. No one recognized him, and rightly so. Who would ever imagine that this rugged-looking man in dusty sneakers was the owner of a Michelin-starred restaurant empire? But tonight, Nathan wasn't seeking the spotlight. He was here to quietly listen, to witness the truth hidden beneath beautifully crafted reports. The glass door of Cole's Bistro opened with a soft chime. The mouth-watering aroma of butter, sautéed garlic, and toasted bread hit Nathan's senses like a warm embrace from the past. The restaurant was bustling, customers coming and going, the clinking of cutlery mingling with lively laughter and chatter. A young hostess gave him a quick, distracted smile. Nathan nodded slightly and chose a hidden seat near the bar, where he could observe almost the entire dining room. The glossy walnut table reflected the glow of the chandelier hanging from the ceiling. On the walls were framed paintings of the restaurant's signature dishes, accompanied by a proud slogan, "Cole's Bistro, where every dish tells a story." Nathan sat there, gently flipping through the menu he had long since memorized, his eyes sweeping across the room, watching every staff movement, every subtle expression from the guests. He had once dreamed of this very moment, back when he was a young chef seeing his restaurant packed to the brim. But why did his heart feel so heavy today? A vague, piercing sensation, like a needle threading through the polished surface of his success. Something was wrong. At that moment, a whisper behind him made Nathan freeze. "He comes here a lot, that's what my mom said." The voice of a teenager, small, hoarse with nervousness. "Yeah, but I don't think he deserves it." Another voice, firmer, laced with anger and indifference. Nathan instinctively held his breath. His hand gripped the edge of the menu, though his eyes remained fixed on the page. His heartbeat thundered. Who were they talking about? Part of him wanted to believe it was just idle gossip from a couple of kids. But his intuition, the very instinct that had kept him alive in the brutal world of business, whispered otherwise. Nathan leaned subtly backward, just enough to let the sound from the next table reach his ears more clearly. "My mom said he destroyed her dream." The first boy's voice lowered, sounding as if it were about to break. Her dream would have turned out differently if she hadn't met him. The second boy's voice tightened, as though he were swallowing his rising fury. Nathan felt his entire body stiffen. Those words, that resentment, struck directly at the wound he had always avoided. Could it be that on his way to building this grand empire, he had trampled on someone else's dream? An eerie unease surged within him. The warm yellow light seemed to blur. The scent of butter and toast he once loved now felt acrid in his throat. A young waitress approached, smiling as she asked, "Hi, what would you like to order?" Nathan flinched. He looked up and forced a faint smile, his voice hoarse. "Just, water for now. I need a moment." She nodded politely and walked away. Nathan bowed his head again, but this time he couldn't read a single word on the menu. Behind him, the whispers of the two boys continued, laced with bitterness and regret. One line in particular left him stunned. "If we saw him tonight, would you ask him directly?" "I would. I want to look him straight in the eyes and ask why he killed my mother's dream." Nathan shut his eyes tight. The atmosphere around him seemed frozen solid. In that instant, Nathan knew. Tonight would not be just another casual inspection. He wasn't merely standing inside his restaurant. He was standing before the doorway to his past, mistakes, and possibly to his reckoning. Tonight's dish would not be French onion soup or a steak drenched in sauce. It would be the bitter broth of truth and regret. The sound of rain tapping on the restaurant's awning blended with the tense whispers behind Nathan's back, forming a slow, heavy soundtrack. He shifted slightly, trying to maintain a natural posture, though every cell in his body felt stretched tight. He had to hear more clearly. "Do you think he still remembers?" asked the younger boy, his voice trembling. "Remember what? People like him only remember money." The other voice was sharp as a razor, soaked in contempt. Nathan swallowed hard. Every word felt like a needle piercing the wall of pride he had built over the years. He didn't turn around, only sat still, pretending to study the menu. But inside, his mind was spinning on every syllable. "My mom used to be the head chef here. Can you believe it?" The younger boy whispered, voice cracking. "Yeah, my mom told me. She gave her youth to this restaurant, only to be thrown out like a dog." The second voice paused, then let out a dry, bitter laugh. All because of him, stealing credit. Nathan felt like he'd been punched in the chest. From deep within his memory, faded images began to surface. The early days when the restaurant only had a few old wooden tables. Young men and women full of passion, sweating over the stove. A woman here, face tired but eyes bright, used to laugh and talk with him in that cramped kitchen. Who was she? A blurry name hovered on the edge of his memory, but Nathan couldn't say it out loud yet. "So what happened to your mom?" the older boy asked, his voice softening. "She quit the profession." Just 4 words, but they landed in Nathan's heart like stones. All she ever wanted was to cook, to stand in this kitchen, to create dishes that made people happy. But now she's waiting tables at some cheap diner on the city's outskirts, all because of him. A long silence followed. Nathan could hear the faint clink of a glass on a plate, the wind howling through the door cracks, and inside his chest his heart pounded erratically. The waitress returned and placed the glass of water on Nathan's table, offering a tired smile. He nodded in thanks, his voice catching. "Are you all right?" she asked gently, perhaps sensing his dazed expression. Nathan only smiled faintly and waved her off. She walked away, leaving him drowning in a swirl of chaotic thoughts. Behind him, the conversation resumed. "Are you sure he's here tonight?" one voice asked, merging with the rain outside. "I'm sure. I heard my mom say he usually does surprise inspections. No showy entrances, no entourage, no fancy suit. Just a lonely man in a cap pulled low, sitting quietly in the corner." Nathan nearly dropped the glass in his hand. They were describing him. Every detail, every gesture, every piece of clothing he had chosen to hide his identity. "You gonna?" The younger voice faltered. "Yeah," the other replied shortly, firmly. "Look him in the eyes and ask, why? Why crush the dream of someone who only wanted to do something good?" Nathan gripped the edge of the table. Outside, the raindrops fell heavier on the freezing pavement. Inside him, a storm of memories raged uncontrollably. How had everything gone so far off track? From the burning dream in the beginning to today's bitter accusations? Nathan closed his eyes, letting the questions cut deep into his soul. Perhaps tonight, he wasn't just sitting in his restaurant. He was seated in an invisible courtroom, and the 2 boys behind him were the witnesses who would convict him. Not with grand statements, but with the simplest, most brutal truths. A decision flashed in Nathan's mind. He had to face this. No more avoiding, no more justifications. He needed to know. He needed to hear the full truth. He had to confront the scars he had left behind, even if it meant being shattered all over again. Nathan clenched his fists. Slowly, he stood up and took a deep breath. The soft scrape of his chair echoed through the heavy atmosphere. It was time. Time to walk straight into those whispers. Nathan stood up. Every step he took felt like treading on fractured ground. The laughter and chatter in the restaurant faded into the distance, leaving only the pounding of his heartbeat in his ears. Just a few feet away, the 2 boys were still whispering, their heads bowed close together, as if their entire world was wrapped in anger and bitterness. Nathan took a deep breath, then quietly approached their table. "Hello, boys." Nathan's voice came out rough, but he tried to stay composed. The 2 boys immediately looked up, their eyes sharp and piercing, locked onto him like daggers. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. The smaller boy, wearing a green hoodie, blinked rapidly, fear and fury flashing across his face. The older one, in a black cap, had eyes burning with fierce intensity. "You 2 are looking for someone, right?" Nathan asked in a low, calm tone. The boy in the cap clenched his fists on the table. "Why do you care?" His voice was as sharp as a blade. Nathan raised both hands slightly in a peaceful gesture. "I just want to help. Maybe I know the person you're looking for." Silence. A thick, suffocating tension filled the air. Then suddenly the younger boy whispered, voice shaking, "He looks just like Mom described." Their eyes locked onto Nathan. Their breathing quickened. The air around them was thick with suspicion and rage. Nathan felt his throat go dry. "I'm Nathan Cole," he admitted without hesitation. "Maybe I'm the one you're looking for." A deadly silence fell. Then, like a time-delayed explosion, the boy in the cap shouted, "Then why did you destroy my mother's life?" The entire restaurant seemed to pause for a beat. A few eyes glanced their way. A waiter hesitated to approach, but Nathan shook his head. No need to interfere. This was the confrontation he had been waiting for. No one else could bear the weight of it. Nathan bowed his head, his voice gravelly. "I'm sorry, but I need to hear this. I need to understand. I need to know who your mother is." The younger boy, hands trembling, pulled an old photograph from his backpack. The photo was wrinkled and its edges faded. A woman stood in front of a grill, her chef uniform dusted with flour, her eyes glowing. Nathan took the photo with shaking hands. The name smudged on her chef coat sliced through the fog in his mind like a blade. Emily Hart. Emily. The dreamy-eyed girl who had once created the herb-roasted chicken, the signature dish that earned the restaurant its first spot in the Michelin Guide. The girl who used to stay late in the kitchen while he, driven by ambition, only pushed harder, demanded more, and took all the credit. Nathan staggered back a step. He felt like he had just taken a blow to the chest. He had forgotten her, forgotten the hands that helped build the very foundation of this empire. "You signed your name under all the dishes she created," the older boy said, voice choked. "You took everything, the fame, the money, and when she finally asked for what she deserved, you kicked her out without a single word." Nathan bit his lip. His hands clutched the edge of the table, knuckles turning white. He wanted to argue, to scream, "I didn't mean to say, "It was the system's fault," to plead, "I was just too caught up." But every excuse died in his throat. Useless, weak, cowardly. "I forgot her," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "I forgot the person who helped build this dream with me." He lifted his head and looked straight into the eyes of the two boys. "I can't change the past, but I want to change the present. If your mother is willing, I want to see her. I want to hear her. I want to apologize. I want to make amends for everything I destroyed." The two boys exchanged glances, their eyes still guarded. But somewhere in their gaze, Nathan caught a flicker of something: hope, doubt, and a yearning to witness justice. The younger boy bit his lip, then pulled out a small piece of paper and carefully wrote down an address. "Here, my mom's house. If you really want to make it right, go." Nathan took the paper with trembling hands, as if accepting a fateful summons. As he turned and walked away from the table, the rain outside began to pour even harder. But within him, the storm had started long ago. A storm of truth, of regret, and of the things not yet forgiven. The next morning, Nathan stood before the glass window in his top-floor office at Cole's Bistro Tower, clutching a steaming cup of coffee. Below, the city was waking up. The early sunlight blurred behind the misty glass. Streams of people hurried along the streets. Car horns echoed in waves. Everything felt familiar. But this morning, Nathan felt like a stranger in his own world. A year ago, he would have started his day with revenue reports, customer data analyses, and grand expansion plans. But today, only one word echoed in his mind: redemption. Nathan set the coffee cup down and pressed the intercom button. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and heavy, "call a senior management meeting within an hour." Sarah's voice hesitated through the speaker. "But sir, there's no meeting scheduled today." "No schedule needed," Nathan interrupted firmly. "Call them now. If anyone doesn't make it in time, don't bother coming at all." A few seconds of silence. Then Sarah answered quickly, "Yes, sir." An hour later, the meeting room on the 20th floor was packed. 12 managers, some tense, some curious, sat around the long walnut table. The air was laced with the scent of expensive perfume and freshly printed documents. Nathan walked in. No suit, no tie, just a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves and eyes burning with intensity. His unusual appearance silenced the room instantly. He stood at the head of the table, eyes scanning each face. "We're doing well, aren't we?" Nathan began, his voice calm and even. A few people nodded cautiously. "Revenue's up. Branches keep opening. The media loves us." He paused for a beat, then lowered his voice. "But do you know we're dying inside?" The room buzzed with unease. Confused, worried glances exchanged across the table. Nathan stepped forward and activated the large screen behind him. On it appeared one-star reviews, customer complaint letters, images of exhausted staff slumped in kitchen corners, and an old drawing of a smiling tomato character, the emblem Mia, his founding partner, once sketched by hand. Everything displayed was harsh, unfiltered, and painfully real. "We forgot why we started this," Nathan said, his voice tight with emotion. "We weren't just selling food. We once sold belief. We sold joy. We sold beautiful memories." He took a deep breath. "And we've lost it all." One of the managers, the CFO, raised his hand. "But sir, our numbers are still growing. Customers still come. The media still praises us." Nathan looked him straight in the eye. "Then ask yourself this: how many customers actually come back a second time? How many employees smile genuinely after a shift?" The question cut through the illusion like a blade. Silence fell over the room. Nathan straightened up. "We need to change, right now. A complete overhaul of employee policy, not just bonuses, but real recognition. Reclaiming customer value, not just fast service, but service from the heart. Honoring those long forgotten, the people who laid the foundation for Cole's Bistro, like Emily Hart." Nathan slammed his hand on the table. "We'll host a tribute event, not for me, not for the executives, but for the ones who were overlooked for years." Several eyes glistened. A few silent nods followed. Sarah, Nathan's longtime assistant, quietly wiped the corner of her eye. For the first time in years, she saw the real Nathan Cole, not the flashy figure, not the proud leader, but a man brave enough to face his own mistakes. At the end of the meeting, Nathan looked up, his voice firm. "If any of you feel you can't walk this new path with us, I won't blame you. But if you stay, remember this. From today on, every dish, every smile, every customer's gaze must be a promise." He paused, scanning the room. "A promise that we've learned from the past and that we deserve the future." As Nathan walked out of the meeting room, sunlight blazed through the window. He closed his eyes and drew a deep breath, knowing the road ahead would be difficult, but at least this time, he wouldn't walk it alone. In the days following that historic meeting, Cole's Bistro was no longer a cold machine driven by profit. It became a living organism, breathing with the rhythm of people, of passion, and of forgotten values. On the very first morning after the meeting, Nathan personally stepped into the kitchen. No more luxurious office. No more perfectly tailored suits. He wore an apron, rolled up his sleeves, and stood beside the young chefs. Anyone who saw that scene was stunned. Some thought he was putting on a show. Others doubted him. But day after day, the sincerity in his eyes and the patience in his every movement answered it all. He listened. The young chefs whispered about challenges they had never dared to speak aloud. He took notes. Every idea, every suggestion, no matter how small, was treated like gold. He apologized. Former staff members who had once been overlooked received his apologies not through bonuses or empty slogans, but with heartfelt sincerity. Then one Saturday morning, as the soft winter sunlight streamed through the restaurant's windows, Emily Hart returned. She walked in with her brown hair neatly tied back, wearing a brand new chef uniform that Nathan had prepared himself. Her name was embroidered over the left chest, Emily Hart, co-creative director. The whole kitchen paused when they saw her. Some were surprised, others whispered, but Emily simply smiled gently and walked up to Nathan. "Are you sure?" she asked softly, her eyes half teasing, half serious. Nathan nodded, as solemn as a student facing the most important exam of his life. "I'm not just sure. I need you," he replied. The launch of the new menu took place a week later. No grand promotions, no gimmicks, just an open kitchen, simple wooden tables, heartfelt dishes, and genuine souls. The first dish served that evening was herb-roasted chicken, the original version Emily had once created. And beside it, a small plate with a humble apple tart, the very recipe Nathan had learned from her in their early days. Before the dishes were brought out, Nathan took the microphone and stood before all the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice clear in the warm space, "tonight is not about honoring Cole's Bistro. Tonight is about honoring the people who built it." He turned his gaze to Emily. "And with your permission, I'd like to dedicate this first dish to say I'm sorry and thank you." Applause rang out, not loud or showy, just steady, slow, and heartfelt. Amid the applause, Emily gave a slight nod, her eyes shimmering, but her smile brighter than ever. From that moment, everything truly changed. The restaurant opened the creative kitchen, a space where any staff member could propose new dishes and have their name featured on the menu if approved. A dream fund was established, made up of 5% of monthly profits, to support young employees in learning the craft and eventually opening their own small restaurants. On every bill, a new message appeared. "Thank you for supporting dreams. You didn't just buy a meal, you helped light a future." The story of Cole's Bistro's rebirth spread quickly, not because of an expensive marketing campaign, but because of stories that touched the heart. One evening, as Nathan was wiping down tables with the staff after closing, Emily walked over and tossed him a cleaning cloth. "It's not over yet, old man," she said, her eyes sparkling. Nathan chuckled and let out a long breath. In that laughter there was a trace of fatigue, but also a deep sense of peace and pride. For the first time in years, he knew he was finally on the right path. Not the one paved with money, not the one coated with flattering headlines, but the one that made him a decent human being. When you stand at the peak of success, don't forget those who walked with you through the mud. True success is not just reaching your dream, but being able to bow your head in gratitude to the hearts that once fought beside you. In the weeks that followed, change at Cole's Bistro was no longer just a declaration. It became a rhythm, a spirit infused into every shift, every plate, and every corner of the restaurant. Nathan's presence in the kitchen became a regular sight. He no longer signed papers from behind a desk, but stood next to dishwashers, line cooks, and servers, listening, observing, and contributing. Staff who once kept their heads down now dared to speak up. Apprentices dared to dream. Longtime workers who had felt invisible for years were now greeted by name, asked for their opinion, and seen. Emily didn't just return to the kitchen, she transformed it. The energy she brought, once silenced, now set the tone for creativity, care, and excellence. She mentored, corrected, and lifted others up. Her dish, the herb your roasted chicken, was no longer just a menu item. It was a story that staff passed down like a legacy. Nathan and Emily began holding weekly meetings with all staff, not to give orders, but to ask one question: what can we do better for each other? Out front, customers started to feel something different. The food was still delicious, but what they noticed more was the atmosphere, the warmth, the honesty. Plates arrived with small handwritten notes from the kitchen. Servers remembered names and favorite dishes. Even the music seemed more thoughtful. Social media didn't explode with grand campaigns, but with real stories. A photo of a dishwasher getting promoted to kitchen assistant, a short video of an intern presenting her first dessert creation, a letter from a guest who cried eating a tart just like the one her mother used to bake. Behind the scenes, the Dream Fund quietly supported dozens of employees. One used it to attend pastry school. Another opened a noodle cart that became a local hit. Emily and Nathan visited them often, not as bosses, but as proud mentors. One evening, as the restaurant closed and staff cleaned up, Nathan stood alone by the window, watching the city lights blink like quiet promises. Emily walked up, leaned on the frame beside him, and said, "This place finally feels alive again." Nathan smiled, his voice low. "It's because now we remember who we are." And that became the new core of Cole's Bistro. Not the stars, not the prophets, but the people. The ones who rise early, stay late, cry over failed sauces, cheer for each other's successes, and believe that food can heal. In a framed letter near the entrance, a new message replaced the old slogan. It read, "Here, every dish tells a story, but more importantly, every person matters." Guests stopped to read it. Staff pointed it out to newcomers. It was no longer just a restaurant. It was a living, breathing promise. One born from mistakes, nurtured by honesty, and carried forward by the quiet, persistent courage to do what's right.